everyone. Welcome to The Right Crowd. I am so very honored and so excited today to present to you Taylor Grant on his panel, Taylor Grant, Film, Fright, and Fiction. I'm incredibly excited for the conversations that are going to be had today. I'm just excited, not only on my end to provide, the audience with answers and insights, but I want to pick your brain and learn and just, I'm incredibly excited. And again, just honored that you're coming on. You have so many different fields that you work with, and I'm so grateful that all of the audience members will be able to learn. You can expand your outreach, and we're going to have a good time. And so to everyone on Facebook and YouTube tuning in, I see our numbers climbing. Hello, thank you for joining. And if you are watching on Facebook and YouTube, feel free to leave a comment, say hi, say hello. And this is a Q&A based panel. So feel free to ask questions. If you have something to say, make a comment, just want to say hello, say something nice, feel free to do so. And we're going to make this as interactive as possible. And this is the last weekend of The Right Crowd. But that doesn't mean that it's the end. We have, today with Taylor Grant ending our Saturday on a very, very high note in just terms of so much knowledge and so much to offer. And I'm very excited for that. Tomorrow we have 2 more panels. And if you just can't get enough of Taylor Grant and want to learn more and rewatch all this again in order to soak up all the information, all of these panels will be able to be rewatched on Facebook and YouTube via author KatelynRenteria.com/therightcrowd. And I already have our first comment coming in from Clover on YouTube saying, "Hola, hi, thank you for joining. Thank you for being here." And I would like to give a brief introduction, the best that I possibly could, because there's just so much to say, and I hope I do you justice for our panelist here, Mr. Taylor Grant. We have an author, professional screenwriter, award-winning filmmaker, and producer here with us to share his insight and share his stories, and I'm incredibly excited. And, getting your start in children's television, entertainment in both live action and animation, and from that, you've moved upwards, being nominated for 2 Bram Stoker Awards for both of your fiction books, which is absolutely incredible. They were Amazon bestsellers as well, which is amazing. And your title, The Dark at the End of the Tunnel, was the number 3 in hot releases and paperback bestseller for Crystal Lake Publishing for 2015. Congratulations and kudos for that. And you've written short films like The Vanished and Sticks and Stones, which were, distributed through Shorts TV and even Sony. And you've sold projects to Universal Studios, Imagine Entertainment, Lionsgate. That's absolutely incredible. And there are a couple of other things that I know we'll get into it in questions. I don't want to give too much away. And I see our Facebook and YouTube numbers climbing. We have likes already, which is really, really wonderful and amazing. And I'll go ahead and stop talking and let yourself introduce yourself. Say hello to everyone on Facebook. We have another comment from Raul Martinez Jr. Here from the Rio Grande Valley saying, "Hi again, Katelynn. Good to get acquainted with you, Taylor." Hi, Raul. Thank you for watching. Thank you for always supporting. So, Mr. Taylor Grant, give an introduction of yourself, your works, your avenues, your career, personal, professional. We want to know all about you and what it is that you do. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katelynn, so much for having me on The Right Crowd. And it really is an honor to be here. And I know there's lots of different levels of writers that are here. So thanks so much for supporting Katelynn and what she's doing. I just want to call out really quickly, in case any of you are wondering, I have a Band-Aid on my nose. I don't want to try to ignore that for the whole thing. I would love to tell you I have some awesome story, that I saved a group of school children from a knife-wielding maniac, and this is what happened. But I don't have a great story like that. It's just a lame injury, and I got some stitches. So that's why I'm wearing a Band-Aid, to spare you from the stitches. But now you know. So anyway, back to writing. I have a very sort of non-linear career, and there was not really a real game plan to begin with, but it has enabled me to have the amazing experience of writing in almost every medium at this point. So I guess while there's obviously many, many authors who are much more famous than I am, many, many authors who are much more financially successful than I am, I think one of the unique things that I bring to the table is that of all the probably thousands of writers that I've met in my life, I've never met anyone who has written, either been paid to write, been produced, or published in as many mediums as I have. So it's given me this really wide scope of knowledge in many different fields. So I've written for film, short film, feature film, live action, animation, television, books, comics, both print and web comics, newspapers, magazines, every form of advertising from radio to TV commercials. I was even hired to write a video game. So I've sort of been all over the place. And it's sort of been tough to describe what I do to people, because I've worked in so many different types of mediums and industries. So people don't really know what to make of me sometimes. But I think at the end of the day, I'm a storyteller. That's what I do. I'm a professional storyteller. And whether I'm telling someone else's story that they're paying me to write, or I'm writing my own story, at the end of the day, I tell stories.
I love that. Thank you. And just, you're just so accomplished in so many different realms that you reach in terms of, with the filmmaking and with the screenwriting and with the, web comics. It's a whole other different avenue. Reach that you create, and it's absolutely, again, wonderful that you're here, to offer the author side and share about your book and your newest title, but also to show that writing expands into so many different areas. It's not just sometimes the written book or poetry. It's writing is everywhere in terms of the movies that we watch and the songs that we sing and all of these different things. And it's a really good testament to students that are watching, or prospective writers, where your niche can be found anywhere. And I think you're an absolute, I love the way that you put it, a professional storyteller, in the sense that you have your reach in so many different places, and absolutely wonderful. And my first question to you is, where are you tuning in from? Because I know I'm here in the Rio Grande Valley in Deep South Texas, Harlingen representation, RGB representation. But Taylor, where are you tuning in from?
I'm currently in Playa del Rey, which is a beach city on the west side of Los Angeles. So I'm near the beach. It's kind of a tucked away, one of the best kept secrets in LA, I think. It's a really nice neighborhood, and it's a lot cooler here than in most of LA. So like in the summertime, it's usually like 20 degrees cooler than everywhere else. So for that, I'm very grateful.
Very nice, very nice. And my first question to you is, you've made your name known in several different realms of media, as we've discussed. And so how did you begin in each of your respective fields? And I know that that's a lot to tackle in terms of there's, how did you begin with screenwriting, and how did you begin with filmmaking, and how did you begin, writing your book, and you have a webtoon comic. And so, did the one field spark all the different other branches? Did it kind of just manifest as you went along, or you sought out to do every single one? How did you get your start? And was it a domino effect to branch into these other aspects of your career?
It's a great question. Well, it all started after high school. I went into the military, and I went into the Navy. And so I became a military journalist. And so I wrote for the naval newspaper. I wrote articles about various things in the military. And I also ran a closed circuit TV station on a ship. So this is pre-satellite, pre-internet. So I had to literally like program for the seamen on the ship. We had our own programming. So I would develop, like at 4 o'clock when everyone would get off work, we would start showing TV shows and music videos, and I programmed all of that. So that was my first kind of like professional writing role. And then after that, I ended up getting into, I got my broadcaster's license. I thought that I wanted to get into radio, actually. And my mom's boyfriend was a disc jockey in Arizona, and I visited him at the radio station, and it seemed like the coolest job I couldn't imagine a cooler job at the time. It's changed a lot since then. This is before like corporations took over radio stations. So I got my broadcaster's license. I was going to get into radio to be a DJ, and I got a job as a board operator. I wrote like public service announcements. Then I got an internship in Los Angeles. So I moved to Los Angeles, and I got a internship at a very big radio station, a large market. And when I saw kind of what that looked like. It was very scripted. The corporation, chose the playlist. It was a little bit. It wasn't as creative as I thought it was going to be. So I decided at that point that I really wanted to focus on writing. And I broke in. I was very fortunate that I got at a very young age was able to break into animation, and I was dating someone actually who had been trying to break into writing for a long time. And she finally got an opportunity to write for a cartoon called Beetlejuice, which was based on the film. And so I was very supportive of her. And I remember she got her first opportunity and she was really terrified that she was going to blow it. So she was running her ideas by me and we were just sort of spitballing ideas. And she was like, wow, you have really great ideas, maybe we could collaborate. And I was like, that'd be amazing, right? So we ended up pitching some stories to this company called Nelvana, which is out of Canada, but they had a Hollywood office. And they ended up buying stories, and then I ended up continuing to sell stories to this series, which were like one-page treatments of what an episode would look like. And some of those were produced, and that led to my next job, which was co-writing scripts for a series called Little Rosie, which was created by Roseanne, the comedian. That was really how I got my entree into the business. So I was very fortunate that way. And from there, I sort of played around in entertainment children's entertainment for a few years, writing live action, writing. One of my funny and yet kind of cool claims to fame was that I was one of the first writers hired to develop the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Which became one of the biggest franchises in history, and so that was one of my very first jobs I ever had, was helping develop that show. So I did that for a few years, but really my dream was to write feature films. And one thing about Hollywood, if you move here, if you live in Hollywood, if you meet anyone who's had any real success, you'll learn pretty quickly that there's no linear way, there's no path that is laid out that everyone can follow. It's usually right place, right time, a relationship here. Every one of my jobs that I've ever had as a writer usually happened through some random circumstance that I happen to be prepared for. So I got a gig writing music videos. And there are people who actually write music videos, which I didn't even know that was a thing. So I ended up working for a company called FM Rocks, and they produced videos. So I wrote music videos. Basically, it was like a one-page treatment of what that video story would look like, what the narrative would be. It was sort of also like an advertising piece, because it would go to the record label and they would pitch it to the artist. So I wrote music videos for Whitney Houston, Shaka Khan, Brandy, the Fugees, and Warren G, and a bunch of others. So that was a really interesting experience writing music videos. The biggest one I wrote was for a band called the Fugees, called Ready or Not. And that was about $1 million budgeted video. Had all these it was a crazy video, submarines and jet skis, and it was nuts. And that led to some relationships with some pretty big directors, including a guy named F. Gary Gray, who's a pretty big director now. At the time, he'd only directed, I think his first movie was called Friday with Ice Cube. And I developed some things with him. We sold a project to Imagine Entertainment called The Last Day, which was a horror thriller. And that sort of began this sort of my transition into feature film screenwriting. And I had worked really, really hard on a script that was called Prometheus Rising. It was a sci-fi thriller about a man who's literally kidnapped by himself from another world. And I'd worked on it for like a year, and I remember like yesterday, I'd spent like a year working on this script, and it was a very complex like sci-fi thriller. It was not an easy plot to write. And I had a close friend read it, a trusted associate of mine who read it, and it wasn't good. The script was not working. And so I was like, oh my God, I spent a year on this script. But he was right. And so I had to go back to the drawing board and start from scratch. So I spent another year writing the script. But that was the script that ended up kind of changing my career path. I ended up selling it to a production company that had a first look deal with Universal Studios. Now, it didn't get made, and that's the interesting thing about screenwriting, feature film screenwriting, that people don't really talk about a lot, is that there are writers who are making a living getting paid to write scripts or be a script doctor, but the scripts are not actually getting produced. So it's very strange to say, hey, what do you do? I'm a professional screenwriter. Oh yeah, what have you done? Well, you haven't seen any of my movies because they haven't been made, but I'm getting paid, right? So that's a very interesting, unique part of it. You know, it's getting an agent's hard, selling is hard, getting it produced is really the most difficult part of all. How do I truncate this long story? So, you know, at this point, I'd worked in TV, I'd worked in film, and look, I'll be honest with you guys, and I'm going to be really transparent in this interview. I'm not going to pull any punches, and because I want you guys to hear it as it really is, because I want you to make, you know, some of the younger writers who want to break into some of these industries, I want you to understand what it's really like, so you don't have this over glamorized, over romanticized view of what it is, so that when you make a decision about what you want to pursue, it's coming from the reality, not the dream. That's not to dissuade anyone. I want this to be, ultimately, I want you to pursue whatever you want with fervor, but it's good to not go in blind. The screenwriting process is very, very difficult in feature film. You know, you're taking notes from a myriad of people: story editors, producers, director, the studio execs, sometimes even the actors. So it can be very challenging to sort of take all of those ideas and assimilate them in a way that still makes a very strong script. And I went through that process multiple times with studios. And to be honest with you, Katelynn, I was pretty burned out after a few years of that. And I needed to sort of, as they say in the food industry, you know, cleanse my palate a little bit. So I wanted to write something for me. And I had always wanted to, you know, authorship seemed like an interesting way to go, because I didn't have to write to market. I could just write for myself. So I talk about this in my first book, The Dark at the End of the Tunnel, in the introduction. And I talk about this idea of having to write to market versus writing what's in here. And so I really wanted to write short fiction. Kind of went back to some of the things that inspired me when I was young. And so I started writing some horror fiction, some science fiction, and found my voice, my true voice as an author. But the funny thing was that I actually wasn't planning on publishing them at the time. They were really just fun exercises for myself. And I actually mean that. I was just having a good time, playing in my sandbox, you know? And I had a good friend who, from high school, who I'm very close friends with, who's a voracious reader. And she asked me if she could read some of them. And I was a little reluctant at first because no one had seen them yet. But she contacted me a couple weeks later and she said, you know, Taylor, what is wrong with you? Why are you not submitting these? These are great stories. So she sort of inspired me to kind of pursue authorship. And so I began to submit these stories. And I got to tell you, the first time I got an acceptance for one of my stories, I wept at my computer keyboard. And I got no problem saying that. It was a defining moment for me because it was a story that, it was my voice. I told the story my way. I didn't make any compromises. And the fact that another editor, you know, found it worthy of publication was such a great validation for me after making so many compromises as a screenwriter. That was just a really beautiful, defining moment. So from that point forward, I just got very, very blessed. I sold every story that I wrote, and that became the beginning of my author career. As far as the kind of the latest stage of my career, which is now, as you know, I'm writing the comic adaptation of Rot and Ruin, which is based on the New York Times bestseller by the great Jonathan Mayberry. And it was a dream come true for me as a big comic nerd. So I've been writing that for about a year now. It's been very successful. It's #1 in its category. We got over 1 million likes this month. which is really, really cool. And that how I got that job is too long a story to get into here, but I will tell you that I have two kind of like major roles there. There's been the writing and producing side, but I also am the senior vice president of IP development. IP meaning intellectual property. So taking our comics and developing them for film, for television, for video games, and everything in between. So that's going on right now, and we're going to have some. In fact, next Wednesday or Thursday, you heard it here first. We're going to be making a major announcement in that regard. So it's going to be career-changing for me, life-changing in some ways. I'm so excited to announce that next week. So keep your eye out for that. I hope that was helpful.
That was good. I'm just in awe in myself of just everything that you've accomplished, and you have all of these titles under your belt, and like the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and like these big studios that you've had contact with, and just the fact that you in so many different realms. I know as just a writer, it can be difficult to be an author, but an author of YA. But then there's also children's, and then poetry, and then and so for you to have your reach in these different entire realms centered around writing, it's just absolutely incredible. And I love that you speak to that to be an author and write your own stories with your fiction books. That was your voice, and you were able to get it heard and be it out there, and it was solely and truly yours. I feel that's one of the most beautiful aspects of being a writer and saying, this story, it truly is my own. This like completely in that transparent kind of way, this was me. This is, you take a piece of yourself and you put it in, and it's scary to put it out there. And, for prospective writers and authors who, maybe want to step into that realm, it is scary, and it's refreshing, to hear that someone as accomplished as yourself, still feels, at times that, is this going to, work or but it's absolutely wonderful, everything that you've accomplished. And I have plenty of comments coming in, and a couple questions too, which is very nice. Rosario Ozuna from Gruya, Texas, here in close to the RGB. She's one book or novel at a time on YouTube, and she says, "Hi, wow, super cool to meet him." Hi, Rosario. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your continued support. And when you were talking about where you're from, near Los Angeles, Nellie Cab, another author and previous panelist, says, "I love that neighborhood." And she does have a couple questions for you. But before we get into that, she also had said congratulations with everything that you've done. And Jeff Naruki on YouTube says the same thing. That's awesome. And Nellie Cab, before I jump into my own questions, I'm glad that audience interaction is happening. She says, Taylor, which of your projects is the one you're most proud of?
Wow, that's a great question. That's a tough question, but it's a great question. I think probably my two books. The Dark at the End of the Tunnel and The Many Deaths of Cole Parker, because they truly are my stories, and I didn't make any compromises in them. I told them my way, and the fact that they've been received so well is extremely gratifying. And lastly, even though I write science fiction and psychological horror, I just want to be clear when I talk about horror, because it's a very misunderstood genre. I write, sometimes I'd call it thinking man's horror. Sometimes you can call it literary horror, quiet horror. Certainly violence and gore happen, but that's not the point. My goal isn't to scare people or to shock them. I want to tell great stories that have important themes to me, social commentary, and ultimately connect with an audience and make them think about the world a little differently. So I approach horror maybe a little different. Not that there's anything wrong with those other kinds of horror. It's just that I try to write stories that mean something to me. If that makes sense.
Very nice, very nice. And speaking of, The Dark at the End of the Tunnel and The Many Deaths of Cole Parker and other stories, how did you, I know that you touched a bit on it in the fact that, this was your voice and something you wanted to say, and you wanted to delve into that arena and being able to, speak in that form where, you know, no compromises. This was really and truly genuinely you. But how did you start out with actually writing those, you know, titles, in the sense that the storyline, did you know that this was what you were going to write? Did you sit down and say, okay, time to write a book, this is what I want to do? Or did, you know, the idea come, it manifested, took twists and turns, here we are now? What are the stories behind those two titles?
Well, the most recent one, The Many Deaths of Cole Parker and Other Stories, that came out 3 weeks ago. There's a novella, a short novel in there. That's what that's called. The Many Deaths of Cole Parker is a novella. I've always been fascinated with the idea of the multiverse and parallel universes, which I first wrote about in my screenplay, The Prometheus Rising, that I talked about a bit ago. And I just think it's such rich territory for great storytelling, because there's just, you know, different worlds that you can explore within that. And so that one had been percolating for a long time in my mind, and an opportunity came up to write that, so I jumped on it. It's something that had been in the back of my head for a long time. The Dark at the End of the Tunnel is a collection of short stories. So that was, I didn't have a real strategic plan when I became an author. Like I said, it was just a passion of mine, something that I love to do, writing short fiction. And when I had enough stories together, it made sense to do a book. And so I was very, very, very fortunate that two amazing publishers took it on. Crystal Lake Publishing took on the paperback rights, and Cemetery Dance, which was a dream publisher of mine for years, took on the ebook rights. So that was The Dark at the End of the Tunnel, my first book, was really a 10-year project in the making, because it was short stories that had been collected over that time period.
Very nice. And I do have a question coming in through YouTube from Jake Kerr, pardon my pronunciation, saying, "Hey, Taylor, with Hollywood effectively shut down for live action due to COVID-19, do you think animation will become increasingly in demand for everything from features to episodic TV?"
Hi, Jake. Good to hear from you, man. Yeah, absolutely. It's already happening. So animation is definitely something that everyone's thinking about. It does have the unique ability to stay in production because a lot of people can work virtually. That you don't have a set, you don't have live action actors necessarily. The voice actors, in fact, they're already figuring out incredible ways to produce animation now. Like the voice actors, they'll literally send them they'll mail them an actual box, that they can record in. Yes, I think we're going to see a tremendous upsurge in animation for sure. We already are. It's already happening.
Very nice. And as a fan of animation, I'm here for it. I'm excited to see the growth, and it's one of those things where you adapt and you continue to grow. And that was actually my next question for you, of just how has our current world situation impacted your writing career? That could be in terms of authorship with your titles and writing and short stories and things, or that could also come into play with being, the screenwriting and the filmmaking and the webtoon with Brought and Ruin and things. With the stay home and limited interaction in person and a lot of these distance things, how has this impacted your career, and what facets has it been influenced?
Sure. Well, it's interesting question. So I just want to state for the record that I'm painfully aware of all the negativity around this. Right? It's a really rough time. A lot of people are really struggling. It's I don't want to undermine any of that. I appreciate the gravity of the situation. So I just want to make sure that's understood. At the same time, I'm the kind of person who really tries to find a silver lining in everything. So I was like, okay, I can't control this situation. I'm stuck at home, right? I'm doing the right thing. How can I take advantage of this situation, right? How can I use this time to my best advantage? And so there's multiple ways I've done that in my life, from health to you name it. But in terms of writing, again, I don't take it lightly, but I'm an introvert, as many writers are, and I just want to make sure that we're clear on what an introvert is, right? So that doesn't mean I'm antisocial. There's a very much a confusion about what that is. I love people. I had a 3-hour conversation with a good friend last night and loved it. One-on-one, I'm great. In crowds, not so much. For introverts, crowds can kind of drain us, So introverts are in their, my understanding is that we're in our power. We're at our greatest strength in solitude. The world desperately needs introverts. If you look at like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, who created Apple, Wozniak was the introvert. He was the guy behind the scenes, creating the computer. You need that guy. And you need the Steve Jobs out there as the showman, right? So for me to be able to work at home in some ways has been the best thing that ever happened, because I've been twice as productive as I normally would. Because I'm not getting interrupted by people. I'm not having people come by my desk. I can be very, very focused. I put on my headphones, put on some music, and just go to town. So I've actually probably accomplished more this year than I've ever accomplished in my life.
Very nice. And I like that you play to the fact that the distinction with introverts, because I feel like that happens a lot where you think I'm an introvert. They think, oh, you don't like people or this interaction. No. Like I know for myself, I love, with the authorship aspect of it, not so much recently, which is a bummer, but, meeting readers and interacting, it's always so fun. But, where can you find me on a Saturday night? In my room, working in my element, just, going at it. And it's, I think it is a good testament, that you said, of just finding that silver lining. And there's going to be difficult times. There's going to be hardships. And as much as we wish that there aren't, sometimes it's just unavoidable, but we do what we can and we persevere. And it's a really wonderful thing to see someone, succeed so exponentially in the fact that taking what, life has, the challenges that have been presented, and we turn and we move forward with it. And I think that's a really good sentiment.
I just want to add to that, the macro micro of that is that, that's sort of like right now in the industry, because all the production is, most productions have shut down. It's become a time for development. So because people can't go out and shoot things, they're focused on pitching things, writing new things, developing new things, and taking advantage of this time where we're all stuck at home. And so for those writers that are listening that had the unfortunate timing of like just finishing a book and were like about to go on a book tour, or like had some of their plans canceled because of this, again, I just feel like, okay, you can't change that. So what you can do is you can start writing your ass off right now when you're stuck at home, and just take advantage of this time that you're forced to be in quarantine.
Very much so. Very much so. But my next question for you is, who or what were some inspirations for your writing career? Either, again, with, screenwriting and filmmaking and things, or with these short stories that you turned into books. Either actual people in terms of, family members or friends or teachers, educators, other authors, other people you looked up to, or maybe even, life situations of, what were some inspirations for your authorship and writing in that aspect?
Sure. I have to thank my mom, who's no longer with us, but much like sons bond with their boys over like baseball games or football, my mom and I, raised by a single mom, she was a movie fanatic. She was a voracious reader, and we bonded a lot over movies. So we constantly went to see movies. We would watch movies on TV. And I think that was probably the inspiration initially for just my love of stories in general. But in terms of like inspiration for the writing itself, I just posted about this recently in social media, that if I had to pick one single inspiration as the most important, it would have been the Twilight Zone. So Rod Serling, the creator of the Twilight Zone, was definitely a huge, he remains a big hero of mine. And I'd say Stan Lee, from Marvel Comics. I own an obscene amount of comics in my collection. I have 50,000 comics in my collection, which borderlines, I think, psychotic. And I but I've read the lion's share of them, and comics were my gateway drug into reading. I started reading at like 5 years old, comics. So that really sort of inspired me to love reading and then to get into books later. So I'd say Stan Lee, Rod Serling from Twilight Zone. I love TV horror movies back in the day. And author-wise, I'd say Richard Matheson was a big influence. George R.R. Martin, Neil Gaiman, Stephen King, of course, would probably be some of my top choices.
Very nice. And we do have a comment coming in from Ana Cavazos here from the RGV. She's also an author and previous panelist saying, wow, 50,000. And it's not in any way, shape, or form, at least from my perspective, in the, what? That's so odd. That's psychotic. In my aspect, it's like, wow, aspirations, trying to reach there, trying to get at that level.
Let me tell you something. When I was growing up, that wasn't the most impressive thing you would tell a girl. I'm glad that the geek culture has really shifted, because that was not something you were proud of when you were a kid.
We evolve, we're growing. but I'm glad that you mentioned, like Stan Lee being one of your inspirations. And that leads me, to the point where I'd like to talk about your experience working with Stan Lee, and just, he's the creator of Marvel Comics, this cinematic universe that we've all fallen in love with, and we see and we recognize these characters. People have the Spider-Man logo and, the Superman, not Superman, Captain America and all that stuff. And we think like, oh my gosh, he's created this whole, this legacy. That's the encompassing word for it. And I'd like to hear more about the experience of you working with him and, side by side. What was that experience like? How did that come about?
Sure. That's kind of a fun story. So, like as you guys know at this point, I just would write in whatever people would pay me to write if I could get a writing gig. So I was constantly sending up, pre-internet, the Hollywood Reporter was a great way to get a gig. That's how I got my gig writing music videos. I answered an ad, and there was this ad. And it said something like, it was very, very generic. And it said something like, comedy writer who understands comic or has like encyclopedic knowledge of comic books needed. And I just sent out my resume like I'd sent out countless times before, and I forgot all about it. Okay, so smash cut to like 2 months later. I'm on the phone with a buddy of mine named Mike. And we're just, talking, and someone clicks in, like another call comes in, and I click over. It's before caller ID, and I hear this very familiar voice on the other end of the line. It says, "Is this Taylor Grant?" I said, "Yes." He said, "This is Stan Lee, L-E-E. You may know me from such comics as Spider-Man." And I was like, all right, someone's punking me. This is no way that's Stan Lee, right? Like, what? But there was like a familiarity that I couldn't deny, and it seemed very authentic. So, and the off chance and the random crazy, it's been like Steven Spielberg calling you out of the blue. It's like, what? So I click back over to Mike. I'm like, dude, somebody's calling me saying it's Stan Lee. He's like, Spider-Man Stan Lee? And I'm like, yeah, Spider-Man Stan Lee. He's like, what? He's like, well, we'll hang up and let me know what's going on. So I click back over, and it turns out that it's actually Stan Lee. And what happened was that the resume that I sent in a couple months before, he had actually found it. And I remember that it was very strange because I had taken a risk, because they were looking for a comedy writer. I had written a funny resume, which I'd never done before. And he really liked it. And so he called me up, and so we started chatting. And I had a kind of a funny story for him, because when I was a little kid, he was on this show, this talk show, really late at night. And I had begged my mom to let me watch it. It was on at like midnight. And she was like, absolutely not. It's midnight, it's a school night, right? And so I was like, and you could, just before, like, you could record these things. So I snuck out in the middle of the night and went to watch Stan Lee on the show, and she caught me. and I got the spanking of my life. And I told Stan the story, and he laughed, and I said he owed me one. So he said he'd give me an interview. And so he called me in for an interview for this to be his head writer for this internet company he started called Stanley Media. And to be honest with you, I didn't even care if I got the job. I was just so excited to meet Stan. I was like, hell yes. So anyway, needless to say, I got the job. It was one of the greatest moments of my life to get that voicemail from him that I got the job. And I think I yelled in my car when I got that message. The first day I got there, I've told this story before, but it's worth retelling. Stanley Media was on Ventura Boulevard in Encino. And he invited me out to lunch to talk about stuff. So we're walking down Ventura Boulevard, and he's in his 70s at this point. And he called me T from day one. He's like, hey, T, I bet you can't do this. And he throws up his leg up and over a parking meter. And after I recovered from that act, I said, you know what, Stan? You're right. I can't do that. So we ended up going to lunch, and I had promised myself that I was not going to nerd out like an idiot and ask him a million questions about Marvel and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and all the old school artists and everything. But I failed miserably. I completely geeked out, and I asked him a million questions about his past and, you know, the creations of these characters. And we had like a 2-hour lunch, and it was pure magic because I had him all to myself, and, you know, he was so happy to answer those questions, and it was just a very, very cool time. And, you know, I'm very fortunate that being his head writer, I got to spend a lot of time with him. We got to do lunch many, many times. He was always very good to me, and I have nothing but great things to say about Stan. I love the guy, and we stayed in contact, you know, all the way up until probably about 1.5 years before his death.
That's amazing. Just the story, the being able to connect, being able, you know, especially just there's so many different levels to it where, you know, just, oh, you know, Taylor met Stan Lee in itself is amazing. Taylor worked with Stan Lee, you know, that in itself is a whole other level. And just, I think the aspect, you know, where you said that he was one of your inspirations as a child, you know, watching him and then being able to one day, we never know what avenues are going to take us where, and being able to make that connection, that collaboration is just something absolutely beautiful and wonderful. And I'm in awe of just all of this. And some comments are coming in from Facebook about that. I know Nellie Cab had said, I met Stan Lee for 5 minutes and totally geeked out. So I think anyone would have. I don't think it would have been possible to have met him and keep quiet in terms of everything else. And she said, that's amazing about it. And as soon as you did, you know, the Stan Lee voice and said, Annika Voss was just, what? Which I'm sure is exactly what was going through your mind as it was happening. And we do have a comment coming in from YouTube from Kayla Cedillo saying, this is my second time coming to an event and I love it. I have learned so much. Katelynn, you're doing awesome. Thank you. Hi, Taylor. So hello, Kayla. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching The Right Crowd. And again, reminder to anyone on Facebook and YouTube, if you're watching, if you have a question, you have a comment, you want to say hi, feel free to drop a comment and, you know, engage, interact, ask questions. I still have plenty more to pick Taylor's brain on and continue to grow and expand the knowledge, have the conversations. And speaking from that, I think my next question for you would be, what is the easiest or most difficult part about being a writer or creator? This could be in any aspect of the realms that you deal with, but what do you think is the easiest aspect of it in terms of, you know, easy, or maybe something that you love the most, or some of the more difficult tasks to get through?
Wow. I don't think I've ever been asked what's the easiest thing about writing, because I'm not sure there's anything as easy about writing. But I get the spirit of the question. The easiest part I'd probably have to say would be, and I'm not saying it's easy, I'm just saying it'd be the easiest part, is probably dialogue. And I'd say that's because, and look, I don't want this to be just about me. I want to, like, you know, kind of give some information that will be helpful to people along the way. So, you know, for dialogue, The reason that it comes easier to me is because I was an actor. You know, I think, speaking to that, if you guys ever struggle with dialogue, I recommend every writer takes an acting course, for sure. It is so powerful in terms of, you know, learning how to build a character, how to build empathy for a character, and certainly how to you know, as an actor, you have to take sometimes clunky dialogue and make it organic and make it sound natural, right? So you start to develop an ear for it. So through acting and through screenwriting, because obviously there's a lot of dialogue, and you're writing for the screen, I think I developed an ear for it. And honestly, reading a ton of terrible scripts, when you read bad dialogue, it's also very insightful as well. So anyway, dialogue comes pretty easy to me. The hardest part would probably be promoting my work, especially as an introvert. You know, it's just like doesn't come naturally to be a salesman. Not that I can do it. I have excuse me, a deep advertising marketing background as well, so I can do it and I can do it successfully. But it's not something that I really enjoy. So everything from, you know, going to a convention, doing book signings, book tours, all that kind of stuff doesn't come naturally to me. So I'd say that would be my biggest struggle.
And that's completely and totally like understandable and relatable as well. I know dialogue is so much fun, or at least for myself, but I feel like I struggle with it in the sense that I start a conversation and I tend to get very in detail in terms of like what the characters are doing. Or I'll be saying something and before you know it, it's one line, and then I go back and I'm like, wait, who said what? Like, if someone reads this, are they gonna understand? And so, but I think it's great, like when the characters come to life in that moment of just they're going back and forth. It's really amazing. And again, the promotion part, I think that's one of the recurring themes. I know a handful of, you know, authors and writers who that's their thing. They love getting out there, engaging, boots on the ground, getting going. But I know for myself, creating the content is fun. But putting it out and, you know, hello, do you want to read this? Like it's a struggle at times. But I like that you had said, you know, that you recommend authors take an acting course. I had never thought of it in that sense where, you know, to get the feel of how you transform into another person. Like, you know, you're pretending. I like when, you know, actors are like, you know, I'm a professional pretender. You know, I play pretend for a living. You know, you're becoming this different persona in and of yourself. And that's an absolutely amazing, wonderful advice to be able to, you know, if you're going to create these characters and take to the pen and make that's absolutely golden advice. I really, really liked that. And stemming from that, Nelly Cab had a question and she had said, do you offer any writing classes from yourself?
Oh, that's very sweet. I've been asked that before, and I honestly I don't. But you know, the more people ask me, the more I'm considering it. So I can't commit to it. But you know, if you follow me on Twitter or whatever after this, you know, if I decide to do that, you'll be the first to know for sure.
Very nice. And before I move on to my questions, we do have another YouTube comment coming in from Jeff saying, when you write, are you more of a planner or a pantser? And, you know, meticulous outline, let's go, or just dive in. It happens as it happens. And so what kind of writer are you in that aspect?
Well, Jeff knows very well that is a very controversial question with very strong opinions on both sides. And for those of you who don't know what that means, planner meaning someone who outlines before they actually do the work, or someone who does it by the seat of their pants. They just go for it without any plan. You know, that debate has been going on for so long, and I totally get both sides. Like, I am definitely a planner, but I understand pantsers' mentality. Like, I know Stephen King is like that, and I think one of his arguments is that that if you plan too much, you sort of lose the organic process of discovery. And there's an argument for that. I get that, but I think there's a happy medium. And so for me, what I do is I am a planner because I started as a screenwriter, and as a screenwriter, you know, you only have 20 pages max for a feature film, right? You can't go over that. In fact, these days, it's like they really want it like 99 to 110. So you have to plan. If you don't plan, you're not going to make that structure. So that was very helpful for me in developing structure. So I'm a big planner, but here's the thing. I don't plan it so, inflexibly that I don't have opportunity to shift and change and move. When I plan, it's a roadmap. And the roadmap is so I don't get lost. A lot of people get lost in the second act because it's kind of like the wild wilderness. They know how it's going to begin, they know how it's going to end, but they don't have a clue what's going to happen in the middle. And so that a lot of people get lost there. So for me, it's a great roadmap so I know where I'm going and I don't kind of lose track of my path. But I'm totally open from a pantser perspective of it changing and shifting and growing, right? If I'm writing and it just isn't working, and a better idea comes along, of course I'm going to go with the better idea. So I struggle with that debate because I think there's a happy medium you can find.
I love that. And I think it's a testament, to any sort of aspiring writer or aspiring author that, it comes, that's the amazing thing about creativity is that every single one of us is different. I'm a graduate student for experimental psychology. I'm trying to go into that realm and our mind and things like that. And I think it's one of the most beautiful, complex, confounding things that, 7 billion people on this planet, so countless in the history of going back and going forward. There's so many different people and not one of us are the same in terms of how we think, how we feel, how we perceive. And, being a writer, you could plan meticulously the way I'm an outliner in the sense that I like to see what happens, but sometimes an idea comes and you scrambling to find that paper and pen or laptop before it leaves because it just goes and goes and goes. And the way one previous author put it is like a stream of consciousness where it just seems to flow and go and you run with it. And, I think it's just a nice testament that happy medium does exist. You don't have to label yourself or try to fit into what you think is the proper box that, this is how I need to write. Like, no, you write the way that you write. And I really like that testament that you brought up that, the happy medium, it does exist and everyone's different and we all have our different aspects like that. But you had mentioned screenwriting in this, with the meticulous planning and things like that for that. But speaking to your screenwriting, you have short films, like The Vanished and Sticks and Stones, and you've had different projects that you've sold to, Universal Studios, Image Entertainment, Lionsgate. So, how were those experiences and, how did they come about? What were they like? More about those short films.
Okay. Well, this is I promised you I would kind of give you an unfiltered, response to these things. I want you to hear the truth. I think that I want to preface this by saying again that if your dream is to be a screenwriter for television or for film, then that's your dream and you need to pursue it at all costs, right? And no one should stop you. But I want to give you some advice based on my experiences, and so you can get a more taste of what the reality is like. So I think as a writer, storyteller in general, as I mentioned, I really love being an author because generally speaking, you only have an editor or publisher really giving you notes. In screenwriting, you're really at the mercy of the person who buys it. As soon as they own that screenplay, they can do whatever they want. And if you don't agree, they'll just fire you and find another writer. In fact, the average screenplay right now, my understanding is that every movie that you see has had probably 7 writers on it. So you think about that. My experience as a feature screenwriter was not very pleasant. I took a lot of notes that were fairly ridiculous and tried to integrate them. Over time, you start to see, look, if maybe you're one of the fortunate ones, you get a really smart executive and they help you tell your story even better. But a lot of times you're going to get conflicting notes from different people. And your job is to, try to find a happy medium between all those sometimes very disconnected notes and contrary notes, right? So for me, personally, this is just my personal experience. I didn't enjoy feature screenwriting because at the end of the day, the story, the script was not my work. It became homogenized. It became sometimes, the spirit of it was really changed. Now, you get paid more as a screenwriter than almost any other writing thing. So there's that payoff. But it's also one of the most difficult things to break into. So I was fortunate. Look, I will say this. When I first started in the business in that regard, in feature screenwriting, I remember reading the odds of selling a script, which are pretty terrifying when you really read how many scripts actually sell versus how many are registered with the Writers Guild. There's something like 50,000 scripts registered a year at the Writers Guild of America. That's 50,000 new scripts going into the marketplace potentially per year. And there's a very small amount of scripts that are sold. So that was I got to admit, it was a little bit disheartening when I first heard those numbers. But that was my dream. And I was like, I'm just gonna write and just, no one's gonna stop me. So I wrote these screenplays, and the one shred of idealism I have left about writing is that I really do believe that the cream rises to the top. And if you truly write something brilliant, and that's the key, if it's actually great, it will get recognized. Because especially Hollywood is a landscape of mediocrity. I was a story analyst, or sometimes called a story reader. So I would read scripts for studios and production companies and producers. They don't have time to read all the scripts, so they hire people to read the scripts and give their take on it. They'll write a synopsis of it. They'll write how marketable it is, etc. Right? And there's people that get paid to do that. So I read hundreds of scripts, and if you talk to any story editor or story analyst, they will tell you almost exclusively, because I knew a lot of them, that maybe one script out of 100 was decent. Maybe one out of 200 was actually worth making a movie out of. And these are scripts that were represented by agents. So there's a lot of not so great scripts out there. But if you can write something that's great, I guarantee you it's going to be recognized. And it's more likely that your script will get you other work than actually selling that and making it what's called a speculative screenplay or spec screenplay, meaning you wrote it without anyone paying you. You wrote it in the hopes that you'd sell it. Very unlikely that you'll sell that, but more likely that you'll get another job because of it. Like they'll recognize your talent and they'll say, hey, maybe this isn't for us, but we have this other project we think you'd be perfect for. Let's talk about that. And that happened to me as well. So my experience with screenwriting was pretty tough, I'll be honest with you. And it kind of drove me to the decision that I wanted to control my work more. And I wanted to actually see something made. I actually wanted to see it on the screen. Because guys, I'm telling you, like, and I want to talk about diversification of your writing in later on, but when you write, it's a business. It's show business, right? So there's a lot of business aspects that are part of it, and it can be very disheartening. I'll be honest with you, when you spend years toiling away writing screenplays, and the only one who sees them are a handful of studio execs, and then they go in a drawer. But no one can stop you from making a movie. No one can stop you from making a short film. No one can stop you from writing a book or making a comic book, right? The barrier of entry is so high for feature films, right? There's such an expensive, these projects are millions and millions of dollars, production costs and marketing costs, right? So it's very difficult to get them made. But for me, I was like, I just want to see something on the screen. I want to see my work. I want to see actors doing my lines. So I was like, how can I get something made? So and this is my recommendation to anyone watching, if you actually want to, see your work out in the world. It doesn't mean you can't follow the old paradigm of writing a screenplay and trying to sell it. You can still do that. That will always exist. But to nurture your soul, to nurture the artist within in those tough times when doors are getting slammed in your face and no one's taking your script seriously, is that you can go make something on your own, and that is so gratifying. And we live in a tremendous time in 2020, COVID removed, that I remember when I got into business, the idea that you could shoot a movie on your iPhone was like, that's like mind blowing, right? So I partnered with a woman named Kate Rees-Davies, and she's from England. She was a go-getter. I met her on the set of a movie called Crows that I acted in. And we just, connected, and she was, so fired up about being a female director. And I don't know, we just connected. And so we said, let's go make something. Let's just go do it. And so we co-wrote a script called Sticks and Stones. It's an anti-bullying film. It's about bullying. And, she, God bless her, she directed it, she produced it. And it was a really gratifying experience because there was a deep meaning to it. It meant something to both of us. And it, screened at the Cannes Film Festival at the Short Film Corner. It was picked up by Shorts TV, which is a channel that buys short films. And because it was shot on a Sony 4K camera, which was new at the time, Sony packaged the movie and put it in as a DVD with everyone who bought that camera. So that was really, for a short film, because it's very hard to get distribution for a short film. So that was really a big deal. And then we did the same thing with The Vanished, which was also a really important topic for us. It was about an American father and a Mexican father in Mexico. And they were both financially struggling, desperate to try to put food on the table. And it follows both of their storylines until they ultimately meet. And the idea was to show that we're all the same, no matter what side of the border we're on. And when I saw, men in Los Angeles on the street corner who were looking for work, I wanted to tell their story. I wanted them to be humanized and understand that they have families that they care about them. They have children that they're trying to provide for. It was really important to both of us to tell that story. And so I'm really proud of that film. And same thing, Sony distributed it with the camera. Shorts TV picked it up, and it screened at the Cannes Film Festival at the Short Film Corner. So very proud of those two movies. And the reason I tell that story is because, again, trying to sell a feature film screenplay or work in television can be a grind, and it can take years. And so as an artist, it's very difficult to not see your work come to life. So and now we live in a time where there's no excuse not to go make something. There's no excuse not to make a 5-minute movie, right? And see actors speak your words and see the visuals come to life of what's in your imagination. And that's it's a beautiful thing. And I highly recommend it. If anything, just to inspire you.
I love it. There's just so many points and so many things to grasp and hold on to, and just, first and foremost, the messages that you have portrayed in these short films and these short movies. Just, a lot of times, we have these campaigns and all of these different things that happen, for things like anti-bullying and things like that. But for someone, of your caliber and everything, to be able to create something that deals with that content, a good message, you're creating with a purpose, which adds another level to it. And this aspect of beauty that, the people who receive it, not only will they be watching something and be receiving in that aspect, but there's a message, there's something to learn. And, with The Vanished, in terms of, American father, Mexican father, and all those things, again, just that aspect of you're creating with a purpose. There's an intent, there's a message. And it's, as a creator, I think that's one of the most beautiful things that you can do, where you have this idea, it's going to come to fruition, but here you are tying something into it that is going to continue to reverberate and reach people on a much deeper, pull at the heartstrings, get to the tough conversations type of thing, which is beautiful in and of itself. And you're inspiring and influencing, as Nelly Cap says, wow, well, now I want to make a short. Yeah. And I think, yes. And I think that's just another, I love it. I love it so very much that, for it doesn't matter, who you are, where you come from, age, demographic, any types of those things, where if you want something to happen, then just make it happen. And I think it is a good, point that you said, where, in the year 2020, all bad things aside, that we live in a time and place in society where there's all sorts of, avenues that we can follow, and the resources are here. The internet is what's connecting us right now in different avenues, and logging onto a computer, and all of a sudden we're reaching all these audiences, and putting live the right crowd interview here together, and there's nothing stopping anybody from wanting to pursue something. If you have the intent, you have the passion, resources are there if you go and work for it, which is a really, really great sentiment. And Ana Cavazos does have a question for you, saying, do you recommend any of the movie script software out on the market?
I'm a big fan of Final Draft. That's what I've always used. That's my favorite, and it's an industry standard.
Very nice. And another realm that I wanted to speak of and talk about, because I know I myself am just excited hearing about it, and I want to learn more, is your place, not only professionally but also creatively. You had mentioned that you're there in two realms, with Webtoon, with your senior vice president of IP development and things like that experience and how you got into it and that sort of aspect, but also Rot and Ruin in terms of bringing that to life, and 1 million likes plus, and hitting #1 in the horror category on Webtoon is just absolutely amazing. And for those watching who maybe you've heard of Webtoon or you're not quite sure, Webtoon is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Taylor, I think the largest web comic place, website and things out there in the world right now. And it's just this hub of amazingly put together comics, and in my mind, they're like graphic novels in the terms of how long some of them are, and the storyline and the characters, and they get to you, and it's just absolutely wonderful. So in that aspect, your work with them as senior vice president of IP development, but also Rot and Ruin, how is that? Sure.
So I'll unpack that, and I'll just separate those two categories, because they're two very different roles there. As I told you guys, I'm a huge comic nerd. So I don't want to deviate too far, but I was so passionate about comics that I actually started my own comic book division print a few years ago called Evil Jester Comics. And it was a imprint of another small press publisher. And we had a very successful first comic called Evil Jester Presents. But I was willing to start a company just to do comics. That's how passionate I was about them. And even though that ultimately didn't work for various reasons, the love of comics has always been been a huge part of my DNA. And so, but it's a very difficult, Marvel, DC, IDW, Dark Horse, it's very difficult to break in. It's a very small industry. And so when an opportunity came up to work with Webtoon, I jumped at the chance. And so for those who don't know Webtoon, it's kind of one of the best kept secrets in some ways, but it's also like this global phenomenon. So to give you a sense of the scope of Webtoon, annually, and when I say this number, it's not going to sound believable, but I promise you it's true and it's documented. We have over 120 billion with a B, 120 billion views of our content annually, globally. So it is a massive phenomenon, and we're the largest comics distributor in the largest digital comics publisher in the world. I highly recommend everyone watching this go check out Webtoons, not because I work there, not because even of my comic, but because if you're a storyteller, if I didn't work at Webtoon, I swear to you, I would be creating a Webtoon. Because what Webtoon does is it has democratized storytelling for everyone. There's no more gateway. Anyone that creates a comic can upload it to the platform. Okay? And it's called the Canvas section. So just like YouTube, anyone can upload their YouTube video, anyone can upload their comic to Webtoon. And if the comic is great, ultimately it will get recognized, and you give the opportunity to invitation to be brought over to the paid side, the curated, edited side, the premium content. And that's how we get 99% of all of our content, is we actually reach out to Canvas creators and bring them over. And there's so many beautiful Cinderella stories, rags to riches stories of people who have created webtoons. The most well-known probably is Rachel Smythe from Lore Olympus. So Rachel is a wonderful human being and she's so talented and smart and deserves all of her success. But she's a Kiwi. She lives in New Zealand. She's far away from any industry related to this stuff. And she had a dream. She's a graphic designer, and she decided to write a comic, and illustrate a comic. It premiered on Canvas, was recognized by Webtoon, and it ultimately became the #1 series in the US, like with global reach. So it's so successful that Korea, which is where we started the company, has now requested it to be translated in Korea as well. And now we're developing that as an animated series with the Jim Henson Company, of which I'm a producer, right? So I'm very, very excited about that. And, that's just to show you that if you're interested in storytelling, in particularly visual storytelling, I think Webtoon is an amazing opportunity. Now, you got to find, if you're not an artist, you got to find an artist to work with, but that's totally doable with the internet, right? You just, you go to Art Center, you go to DeviantArt, and you try to find an artist that you want to partner with, and you go make a comic. And we have such a diversity of voices, whether it's Latinx voice or Black voices, every conceivable type of LGBTQ, they're all there. There's no censorship of any kind, other than the usual, graphic sex or graphic violence, but everything else is totally open. And so a lot of the writers there, it's the first thing they've even ever written, and they're having a lot of success. So I urge you to explore it. If Webtoon had existed when I was in my 20s, that would have been my career. I would have chosen that for my career. I'm telling you right now. So I get this gig, and I got this opportunity to write and produce Rot and Ruin. Was a big fan of the book, a big fan of Jonathan Mayberry, the author, who's amazing. He's an amazing human being as well as a great author. And, we acquired the license to adapt the book. And I was fortunate enough to be offered the opportunity to write it. And so we launched that in January of this year. And it's hit #1, I think, every week since we launched it. It goes back and forth. It's kind of in battle with a few other comics, but it hits #1 usually once a week. And we're actually wrapping up the series now, but it has been a dream come true for me. The little, 12-year-old boy in me who used to ride his bike in the hot Arizona sun every weekend to the comic book store, 3 miles away with his 50 cents in his pocket, praying to buy a comic. Like, that little kid is just over the moon excited that he got to finally write a comic for a big publisher. So that's been a dream. The IP development side is also incredibly exciting. So we have a strategic partnership with Crunchyroll, the anime brand, and we've got some co-productions that we've done with them. So I've been in business development, helping to structure those deals. And so Noblesse, which was released October 6th, I believe. The God of High School, and Tower of God were our first 3 releases this year. And I'm happy to say they were all amazing successes. Tower of God, when it was released, to give you a sense of scope, was, I believe, 13. It was trending 13 worldwide on Twitter, above COVID. That's how big it was around the world. So we're going to continue that partnership. And my one caveat is that we're going to make a huge announcement on Wednesday or Thursday of next week about our film and television, what we're doing. I can't give any details, unfortunately, but it's been a year and a half in the works, what we've been doing behind the scenes. I will be leading the charge in that regard. And the idea that I'll be, producing film and TV for Webtoon is just a dream come true.
I cannot express just the absolute excitement I have for you and in this aspect, in that you work with this in both aspects, in the creator side and, the actual development with Crunchyroll and things is just absolutely amazing and phenomenal. The fangirl in me was screaming the entire time that you were giving these explanations, like of Webtoon. Lore Olympus, absolutely beautiful. 100% am in love with it. I did not know that there was the perspective like animated series and things like that. That is absolutely amazing. And again, the testament to, any person can log on to Webtoon, create content, upload content, and regular people busting through and making these things. That's absolutely amazing. But love Lore Olympus. And just the aspect of, being partnered with Crunchyroll and making these anime. The God of High School is quickly becoming one of my newfound obsessions. I'm obsessed, telling everyone I know about it. And just, again, I'm trying to restrain myself of the fangirl in me to absolutely go crazy in the fact that you play these large roles and that you're here, boots on the ground, making it happen, producing, working. It's just absolutely incredible. And I had a few comments coming in. Ana Cavazos had said, amazing. I just checked out Webtoon. Amazing. And I love the way that you said it, where, it's kind of this, it's an oxymoron, where it's this hidden secret, I think, because I do know quite a few people that I know they have no idea what Webtoon is, never heard of it. And it's not something you hear as mainstream as Netflix or Amazon or something like that. But once you discover it, the reach is amazing. The fact that it's this own phenomenon, and I think this entire new innovative, it's like its own little world of any sort of creator can come through and be a part of the industry. And it's absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And congratulations on all the success with that. And I am going to be on the edge of my seat waiting for this announcement next week in terms of just all of that. And I'm losing my train of thought just because of how excited and just in awe that I am. But I do want to ask, in just everything that you do from all of the different realms, you use the term nonlinear just to, you have all of these things. It's not just this is who you are, it's this reach and that and all of these things. So I know the one that deviates, or, for lack of a better term, deviates from all of these other things, because, screenwriting can be seen as the job. Filmmaking is something that you went into where I want to see my own content created. With Webtoon and things, that in itself is the job. But for authorship and your two books and titles and short stories and things, how do you balance, that with other aspects of, your actual career and other creative things? Do you find that they're two distinct parts of your life, or they overlap, or you have to take time away from work to work on books and short stories and publishing and marketing, or, what are the deviations and, that aspect of your life? How do you balance all of that?
Sure. Another great question. And are you going to ask me about, if I had one piece of advice?
Yes.
Okay. I won't talk about it now, but it relates to what I'm about to say. Look, it's hard, and I've been working 12-hour days every day for probably a year and a half. I have not had a day off in probably a year and a half, an actual day off. So it's not for the faint of heart, and I definitely need to work on my work-life balance. For sure. But look, we're Webtoon in some ways, in terms of film and television, is startup. So there's a lot, you had to roll up your sleeves and get the work done. So I knew that it would be tough, and I knew that, look, that job in itself is a very challenging role. But on top of that, writing and producing a comic and promoting my book has been, and I'm a single dad, so it's been, it's just been a lot going on. I don't have an easy answer for that. I think that, you like, for example, with Rotten Ruin, it's a weekly comic. So I don't have a choice, right? It has to get done. I have an art team, an amazing art team that works on that comic, and they need their scripts. And then I also art direct. I also, there's a lot of aspects of the job that I produce it. So, for example, what I figured out was, okay, we're in a pandemic. I'm not getting any exercise, which is it's just hard on the body, right? Just sitting all day. So I would go out, I plan to go out for an hour every day and go for a long walk. And during that walk, I would actually write my script. I would start writing the first draft of the script. So I write it on my phone. I speak into my phone, which is part of my writing process now. My first drafts are dictated. And so it's trying to be as efficient as I can with the time that I have. There's no time for me right now really to work on my own fiction. And as I get more into producing, that's probably going to be less so. So I'm trying to be realistic about it. I don't have an easy answer other than you take this window of time you've got. Fortunately, deadlines force you to be very efficient. I don't get to Netflix, I don't get to watch, binge watch Netflix shows. My social life has definitely taken a hit, but it's all been for a good reason. So I don't mind working my butt off this year.
Very nice. And I like that you touch on the aspect where even just, as you're going about, taking a walk, or even I know for myself, sometimes ideas hit like when I'm running errands or something. And, it wasn't a thing that I used to think could happen, like dictating like ideas and things. I was always constantly scrambling to find that piece of paper or the sticky note or make the note on my phone. But I think it's just, again, that outside of the box where whatever works in order to get your ideas out, whatever works to get the creative juices, to make sure it's documented, that you can refer back to, maximizing your time where, taking the walk, getting the exercise, I can go on and on and on and on and on about the physical and mental, benefits of being outside and all of those, especially in a time like, where we're forced to stay inside and, limit contact and all those things. But there's always ways to continue to get done what you need to get done. And, deadlines, they're great. And, the stress that comes with them, but also that they get you going, they get you moving. But yes, I think my next question is a bit more towards, further down the line of what do you see for your future pertaining to writing or any of the other aspects of your career that you work in, either goals that you want to achieve, goals that you foresee happening. And this could be in anything with Webtoon, both as a creator and a professional, screenwriting, filmmaking, more short stories, books, more those kinds of things. What do you see for your future?
Well, producing is going to be a big part of my future. Probably the lion's share of what I'll be doing. So, which is amazing. And I'm very excited because it's very creative. We work with writers, we work with other co-producers to bring these things to life. So it's a creative executive role. And in terms of my own writing, I'm at a time in my career now where, I don't have, when you're very young, sometimes there's things you need to prove, and I don't really need to prove anything anymore. So I'm not really driven by anything ego-wise. It's more about what's in my heart. So I'm very selective and pick and choose the kinds of things I want to write now. And that dovetails into this whole idea of, do you want to make a living solely as a writer versus is it okay to have a career and write as well in parallel to it, right? Which is a very important topic. But for me, for example, I can't give details, but 2 opportunities that come up in the past couple of weeks to write short stories for 2 amazing venues that are fantastic. And I would love to do both of them. And so that excites me because the venue in which the story will be is something that I'm a big fan of. So that's like the fanboy in me is ooh, I would love to do that, So I think I'll be very, very selective because of my limited time on the things I write. I do have a novel in the works. a thriller, and but I don't know. I don't know when I'm going to finish it, so we'll see. But right now, I don't have a strong writing agenda other than I'm in a place right now where a very fortunate place where I can pick and choose what I want to do.
Very nice. And I think that's just a testament to your success. We're here presented with multiple things and all of these things on your roster and your to-do list, and, you know, saying, I can do this, I will do this later, I have all that. That's just, you've accomplished so much, and you continue to be in so many, you know, avenues and just creating. And I'm inspired, and I'm, again, just honored to have you and, you know, get these conversations started, ask these questions. It's just absolutely amazing in all the different realms and aspects that you operate in. And I know that much more to come. And you're not the only one with novels that you have no idea when they're going to come to life, but sometimes that's how it is. We work and we try and we create, but continuing to create and, not completely shelving it away, knowing that it's going to be there. I will return for later, continue, it might take time. It might, little by little, but, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. We keep going, we keep working, we keep creating. Well, and yes. And I have so many questions and I'm trying to pick and choose of which one is the next flow and things. But I think, do you have any interesting or close to your heart stories in your career as a creator? I know the Stan Lee story was absolutely amazing. And, either in the authorship or the screenwriting, the filmmaking, the producing, this could either be an interaction you had with someone, a moment that you often, look back on and it's close to your heart, any stories in any of your career aspects that you tend to, close to your heart, you look back on fondly.
So you don't mean not actual fiction stories that I've written, but actual anecdotes from my career.
Real life occurrences, yes.
Well, yeah, certainly Stan Lee was one of the biggest. Let's see here. That's a really good question. I think, yeah, I briefly touched upon it a little bit ago, but I remember that I wrote a story called The Infected. And it was a very personal story to me. And it talked about, it was actually nominated for a Bram Stoker Award. And it was about a man. It was a horror story in some ways, and had some horror conventions to it. But it was really about a man living a life of quiet desperation and not giving up on his dreams, not letting his soul-sucking corporate job kill him, literally. So anyway, I wrote a draft of that and I gave it to a person that I worked with named Joanna. And Joanna took it home and read it. And when she told me that it had changed her life. And she said that it had inspired her to pursue her dreams. It was sort of like a cautionary tale. So it was inspirational in a weird way. It was don't do what this guy did, right? And she was so inspired that she actually quit and moved to Hawaii to pursue her career in Hawaii. And I'll never forget that as long as I live, because it was I wrote something that was so impactful to someone that they actually followed a different path. And not that that's what I'm trying to do with all my work, but it just goes to show the power of storytelling. And so that resonated with me. And so I don't try to preach in my comics or anything, or sorry, in my stories or anything like that. So that's always very obvious. But I do try to be authentic and true, because of that exchange I had with Joanna, always is in the back of my head.
I love that. And I think, that's just a testament to how, for lack of a better word, just how good, you are at, this writing aspect and that sort of thing. But also just the messages, that's when the authenticity is true. That your voice, this aspect, you had said that it was a very, personal story. You made it, you hit the mark, and you know, as a creator, even if it's, you know, best case scenario of like, you know, 100,000 people read this story and they digest it and it's taken in, but one person truly resonates and truly understands and lives their life with this, having that connection be made is one of the most beautiful things possible. And that's really wonderful. Just, you know, it's incredible. You don't anticipate the connections that you make. You know, I'm sure when you wrote that story, you weren't like, oh, yes, I'm going to make this person, you know, do this. It's going to be great. But we don't know the impact that's going to happen. And it's one of the best parts of the job, I think, being able to make those connections and resonate in things. But again, to anyone on Facebook or YouTube, a reminder, if you have any questions or want to say hi or any comments on anything being said, please feel free to do so. I have 2 more questions, I think, and then I can turn the floor back over to you, Taylor, if there's anything else you want to add or speak about or say testament to. But this next question is kind of a fun one, and I'm interested in seeing how you're going to answer. Of just, you know, if I were to meet you on the street, I'm just walking around, I bump into you, say, hey, Taylor, great to see you. I don't know how that would happen if we're so far apart in all of these states, but, you know, hopefully one day. And I say, you know, what's going on? What are 3 things that I would never find you without? Like, you'd always have these 3 things on you. This could be pre-pandemic because, you know, now it's the mask, the hand sanitizer and things like that. But, you know, just a fun little question. But what are 3 things that I could not find you without?
A chainsaw, an axe, and a butcher's knife. No, let's see. What could I? Well, obviously my phone, just because that's our life now. Pre-pandemic, I used to get, people used to kind of make fun of me sometimes because they'd never see me without a backpack. So I always have a backpack slung over my shoulder, kind of carry my life around in that. And thirdly, there's always a book in my backpack, so that if I get stuck at, you know, in line somewhere or decide to have lunch on my own, I've got that book to turn to.
Thank you. And I feel recognized because I am one of those people. I don't even know how many different backpacks I have, either just like they're nice or, you know, they're merch backpacks or just different things. Like I always have something on me and people are like, why do you even like, why a backpack? You know, can't you just like have a lanyard with like your keys? I'm like, you don't understand. Like I have like all these things in there. So like, thank you. I feel recognized. I feel acknowledged in that aspect. But one question that I did want to touch on, and I got too wrapped up and caught up in the excitement of Webtoon, but I know you're a comic book fan, you are an animation fan, and, you know, in that aspect of all sorts of other creations or, you know, universes or different things, on the personal side, what are you interested in like right now in terms of like fandoms that you belong to, like TV shows, either like live action or animation or anime or, you know, fictional content? What's piqued your interest and that you're interested in consuming?
Sure. Well, my nerd is going to be showing pretty strong at this point. And it's funny because the first 2 I would mention are both the same genre, but a complete dichotomy. So The Boys on Amazon, which is a superhero show, but a very, very dark superhero show. And actually I love My Hero Academia, the anime series, because it's so pure of heart and it's so, you know, it's such a love note to the superhero genre. And, you know, it speaks to empathy and kindness and compassion being just as important as winning and fighting. So I love both of those shows. Generally speaking, I tend to watch a lot of dark stuff though. You know, from Fargo to Better Call Saul. Someone recently turned me on to Ray Donovan, which I found was really, really good, but really dark. Got to take a shower after some of those episodes. I'd say, you know, in terms of fandom, you know, I'm a huge Marvel nerd. So, I mean, I'll never miss a Marvel movie, and I'll never miss a DC animated series. I'm sorry, DC animated movie. I've seen all of them. You know, I don't think the superhero nerd in me will ever die.
I love it. I love it because I'm the exact same way. Just the major thing that people staple me as, like if they know me personally, is just the superhero nerd, the superhero aspect. I'm in love with DC, anything and everything with Batman, Superman, Flash, all those, and I could go on for days about My Hero Academia and just exactly the way you said. It's a true testament that it's so pure, but it's enraptured this humongous audience in terms of all ages, all demographics, all types, all genres. In that, it's just the message it's portraying. It can be seen as both like simple and complex, like just simple. Anybody can be a hero, but the complexities that lie within that, in the struggles and the overcoming and the difficult conversations to be had sometimes. And I think that's sometimes when some of the best work, when you have a real winner, a real this is amazing, when the message is both like simple in its disposition, but the complexities within it is just amazing. And we have Nelly Cab making a suggestion saying watch Utopia on Amazon, comic books and dark humor.
Oh, thanks for that. I definitely will. Also I should say, look, even though I'm a nerd, I because of my job, I need to watch a broad spectrum of shows. So I do watch other stuff beyond just geek, nerddom. Like I fell in love with The Great, which is about Catherine the Great. It's sort of a reimagining of her story, as the leader of Russia. So I do watch more than just anime and superheroes.
That's great. And I think that's just, on one of the previous panels, we called it research. Like, like binging Netflix and Prime and all that. Oh, I'm researching, trying to get all of these information and, content for my own productions. But one last shout out to everyone on Facebook and YouTube watching. If you have any final questions or any final comments to say, speak now or forever hold your peace, because I'm moving on, to the last final question before turning it back over to you, Taylor, for any final things that you'd like to say. And my last question would be for aspiring writers, aspiring filmmakers, aspiring screenwriters, producers, authors, just creatives in general. What advice would you offer? Either maybe it's something you've learned along the way, something you wish you knew before you started a certain avenue. What words of wisdom or advice would you offer to anyone aspiring to be a creative?
Sure. So it's a really important question. And, I think we all have that wish fulfillment. If we could go back in time and tell our younger selves, to maybe make a left turn instead of a right turn or whatever. And I sort of imagine, like, if I had to tell my son, give him some advice, what would I tell him? So there's kind of two prongs to this. One is, if you want to be a writer, that's fantastic. And we need more writers in this world. We need more voices. Creating art is so important. And in this pandemic, we've seen the importance of art more than ever before, right? Without artists, we wouldn't have Netflix. We wouldn't have all the music. We wouldn't have all the books that we're reading in this time. But I think that people can become very myopic and tunnel vision on what that looks like. And so I'm proof positive that as a writer, you have a myriad of avenues to be a storyteller. And I encourage you to please try looking at other areas. It doesn't mean you can't still pursue your main dream. If your main pursuit is to be a novelist, fantastic. Keep doing it. But why not look into some other avenues? You may be surprised how much you would enjoy seeing your work come to life as a short film or as a comic or on stage, right? There's just so many ways that you can tell your stories. So that would be the first thing, is like, think about diversifying, And if you don't like it, great, move on to the next thing. But you may be surprised and find something that you fall in love with. So that's number one. Two is, this is for the younger writers. Being a creative writer, and that's your single source of income, is a dream come true in some ways. And I did that, have done that. There's been lean times, believe me, but it's a blessing to be able to do that. But the problem with that is, especially when you're young, and this happened to me, was that I would write what anyone would pay me to write because I needed the money. And there's a certain desperation that comes with that, which means your choices are limited. And so I ended up writing stuff that I wouldn't probably, I wouldn't say a waste of time because it was still developing my craft, but they weren't things I was necessarily proud of or would have chosen. So trying to pay the rent with your creative writing is very challenging. If you're worried about paying the rent, being creative is very tough. To be inspired is very tough when you're living in a state of fear of where your next meal is going to come from. So I paint that picture because if I could go back in time, I would have, rather than started as a creative writer, or you can do them both in parallel, I would have figured out a trade for myself that I can count on during the lean times and the hard times, my base of security. Don't think of it as selling out or that this is going to detract you from your career. Writing is a marathon. It is a long game. If you want to do this, it's a lifelong process. And so, I got into marketing and advertising writing as a copywriter, later in life. If I could go back in time, I would have done that first and developed that trade because you can make a good amount of money at it, which would have alleviated a lot of the pressures of paying the rent. And then you get to write what you want to write, right? Then you can really focus on the things you really want to do. So I think that having a trade that you can count on is really important because then you don't have to worry about when your next job's going to come from or anything like that. You can at the end of your gig or end of your day, you can take off that hat and you can put on your creative hat and have fun and be inspired and enjoy what you're writing, if that makes sense.
I love that. And it's, it deals with the, realistic aspect of it as well as still, pursuing. Because there's, it'd be amazing, to like take the dream and run with it and reach success after success after success. But, there are obstacles in the way that come sometimes and some reality checks that we have to have, even if, it could be a sad, like, downside to it, but it's necessary. And, the payoff is amazing once you, pursue the dream, stay with it, keep going, put in the work, put in the effort. You know that it's going to be difficult or challenging at sometimes, but it just makes the reward all the more rewarding in being able to see it happen and, come to fruition. And we have a comment coming in from Nelly Cab saying, thanks for sharing so much great information and taking the time to do so, Taylor. I have taken a lot into consideration and learned a lot from this interview. I'm on webtoons.com now. Thanks. And Katelynn, you have done an amazing job with this virtual author expo. You should take another major in journalism. You're a natural girl. I love you, Nelly. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. And I absolutely agree with everything. And just thank you so much for taking the time to come and share your insight, tell your stories. I was so eager to just learn so much and absorb so much. I knew I was going to be having to play the moderator role of this and interviewing, but I know at the same time I was going to be the fangirl and like the sponge absorbing it all and taking it all in. And Ana Cavazos also says, thank you for being here and sharing all that insight. I enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. And Taylor, do you have any, final things to say or final words to tell our audience before we sign off?
I just would say writing is tough business. So it's really up to you to find ways to continue to nurture yourself as an artist. Find ways to, because it's a business, sometimes it's easy to forget about why you got into the business to begin with. You want to be a storyteller, right? That's one of the reasons I like to diversify, so that, like, for example, the screenplay may take years to get made, but I have the comic to sustain me creatively, right? I have my short stories to sustain me creatively. There's longer term goals you can have as a writer, and there's shorter term goals you can have as a writer. And I think sometimes the shorter term goals, no one can stop you from writing a short story. write a short story, enjoy it, have fun, play, tell the kind of stories that you want to tell and not worry about the market, you know? And I think it's important to remember why you got into the business to begin with. And if you've been doing this for a long time and you've kind of forgotten that, I encourage you to find new ways to again, find the joy in what you're doing, because that will come out on the page. And lastly, you know, this is more for my publisher than me. Running Wild Press is my publisher for The Many Deaths of Cole Parker. They're amazing. They are very open to new and unique and young voices. Check them out. And if you're going to support them, I just, you know, if you're interested in anything that I've done, check out The Many Deaths of Cole Parker. I'm very proud of it. It's, I think, my best work. And that's my only promotion I'm going to do.
For anyone interested in seeing what The Many Deaths of Cole Parker looks like, because I know just I myself am in awe of the book cover, we have here The Many Deaths of Cole Parker and Other Stories by Taylor Grant. I'm interested in this. I'm going to try to get my hands on a copy. I'm sure it's a fantastic read. And where can we find you after this if people want to learn more and continue to follow you? Any social media or links you'd like to share?
Sure. You can go to taylorgrant.com. I definitely update the there's a new update section that I update quite frequently, and you can find me at Taylor Grant Zone at Twitter.
Very nice, thank you. And again, I'm gonna have my eyes and ears peeled for that announcement coming up next week that you have. I will continue to support and continue to share and promote and just everything that you do. And once again, I cannot thank you enough for everything that just, you know, your support of myself is amazing. The fact that you're here sharing, you know, this creative advice and all the different avenues that you share and spread, and you've accomplished so much. And I know you still have so much more to give, and I'm astounded and amazed in everything that you've done. I continue to support you, and just again, thank you for taking the time and be here. It truly was a pleasure and an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Katelynn, and thanks for everyone listening. Thanks for coming out and supporting the show. She deserves it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And again, everyone on Facebook and YouTube, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. This is not the end of The Right Crowd. We have 2 more panels coming up tomorrow at 2 and 4 o'clock Central Standard Time. And again, if you tuned in a little bit later or you just want to hear this entire amazing conversation again, all of these are available on author Katelynn Rentería YouTube and Facebook, and author KatelynnRenteria.com/The Right Crowd. So thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. We have Clover on YouTube saying a final thank you to both of you. Thank you for watching and tuning in. And we will see you next time, everyone. So thank you.